Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Ward, and I have the privilege of serving this community as minister, and that was Crystal Santana. Crystal is an amazing violinist and fun fiddler who plays many genres from Celtic rock to Irish and classical. She brings joy in her playing, and she's currently in the midst of moving from North Carolina to California to be closer to the Celtic rock band that she just joined, named the Fenians. Fenians? Fenians. The Fenians, who just returned from their Irish tour a week ago. Crystal's life mission is to offer music as a pathway to connection and joy. She is beloved among her fans, friends, and family, some of whom include her very proud grandparents, Joanne and Chris Schreiner. This morning we will ring our bell as we do each Sunday. The first time we ring it is to bring us back into covenant. We are on the unceded land of the Muwekma tribe of the Ohlone people. They were displaced, colonized, their land taken. Now they seek to regain their land and pass on their culture and heritage to their descendants. Everything that we do to help them regain their sovereignty works our way back into covenant. We ring the bell a second time to help call us back into relationship with ourselves and with one another, to recognize broken promises or unhealed hurts, lingering scars where being right was more important than being in relationship. We intentionally gather to create an ever-widening circle of compassion and commitment until we are all beloved. And the third bell calls us into relationship with our children and our children's children out to the seventh generation, reminding us that what we do today or what we fail to do will be felt by those who follow.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Davis. I'm your worship associate this morning. I'll be talking about another essay from the book, Love at the Center. This essay is by Reverend Ashley Horan, titled Death, Glory, Love, and Evil. Of course, as universalists, we believe that God is too loving to condemn anyone to eternal damnation, even if they're unrepentant sinners. Horan claims that while we feel an alignment with love, we can also feel misalignment. And this is when we have negative feelings such as anger and hate. Unfortunately, with enough repetition, we develop a tolerance for misalignment with love, and we justify our behavior no matter how bad. Horan feels that those who intentionally wield power to dominate others do not repent, and that UUs have a moral imperative to name and directly confront evil. Horan believes we need to talk about what we are against and take action to counteract evil. I admit to having difficulty in my own life with the concept of evil. I want to see the good in everyone, and I want to believe that with enough education and opportunity, people can change their ways towards love. I also have trouble confronting evil. But in situations like our upcoming election, I do feel strongly that we need to out those who desire power for the domination and degradation of others. Reverend Greg will be talking further about how inaction can lead to evil in the form of fascism. Are we as a congregation brave enough to recognize and confront evil? Are you ready to stand up and be counted in Tuesday's election? All right, we will now be joining in reciting our Unison Chalice, which will be our mission statement. So I'll wait for that to come up. Nope, I guess it is up. It's just not over there. Okay. The foundation of Mission Peak is love. We are a spiritual community of open minds, nurturing growth and healing in ourselves, and courageously as we work for a non and sustainable world. We came close.
Good morning. I'm Valerie Stewart. I am a member of the board. My pronouns are she and her, and we're so glad you've joined us this morning. Unitarian Universalism is a radically inclusive, non-doctrinal, non-dogmatic, open-minded, and open-hearted faith. We are people who are all coming at truth from different paths. We gather together across different identities, experiences, and beliefs to affirm and promote the inherent worth of every person. Together, we see our job is to love the hate out of the world, heal the hurt in ourselves and one another, and be the change we want to see in the world. If you're our guest for the first time, we welcome you, and welcome back Jennifer and Brian from Kansas City, Kansas recently. Here's how our hybrid services work. We use chat and Zoom or the book near the welcome table with the handsome John Schaefer there to share our joys and concerns, personal milestones of importance which will be read aloud in the service. We also have a social hour after service where we get to visit with one another, either in breakout rooms on chat or on the patio. It's going to be warm enough, we'll be out there. The worship host will give you more information about this immediately if you're a Zoomer. John from the membership team will put a link in the week on the peak and in chat so that you can find all the upcoming events to join anything that speaks to you. We also put our welcome email, welcome@mpuuc, to request a newsletter or other information to be sent to you. If you're here in person, you can sign up at the welcome table to receive the newsletter or ask any questions you may have. Please silence your electronic devices. And before we go into the big wave, here are some announcements in chronological order. November 7th, 5 p.m. at Cole Hall, we'll hold an election vigil. This gathering is not a call to action. However the election turns out, we'll come together bringing our hurts, hopes, and weary hearts to call forward a spirit of healing and communal solidarity, naming the truths in our hearts. At 5 p.m., there'll be some food. Thank you, Kathy Bain. And 5:30, the vigil will start. And then on Saturday, November 7th, drum roll, it's the Black and White Auction celebration. Tickets are only $30. We suggest maybe you get together and create a watch party and attend together. The catalog is now available. John and Julie did a fabulous job. Everybody's donated wonderful events. All the information is in Week on the Peak. If you or someone you know is in search of mental health or family support resources in the Tri-City area, please contact our wonderful community minister, Reverend Barbara Myers. Now we'll ask everyone in Zumandia and here in Kohal to wave to one another, feel the joy of being together in one beloved community. Welcome.
Are fascist. Fascism is a very particular ideological structure. When thinking about fascism, you can't think about these individual elements in isolation. They come as a bundle. My name is Jason Stanley. I'm the Jacob Urowski Professor of Philosophy at Yale University and the author of 5 books, most recently, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. We forget that many fascist regimes started off as democratic political parties. We forget that Hitler, the Nazi Party, ran in an election. Fascist parties start as fascist social and political movements before they come to power. So it's important to see that these tactics occur even in societies that do not have a fascist regime. All nationalism involves a mythic past. So you can say, look, we're Polish people who spoke Polish and were sheep herders, and another bunch of Polish people who were fishermen. You can talk about how things were wonderful when we were all Polish together. That's a fine mythic past. But then there's the fascist mythic past. In the past, we were great. Wherein did our greatness consist? In our military. And in the past, the dominant racial group ruled over others. And then the fascist leader says, that has been taken from you by the leftists and communists. They want to weaken our military. They want to weaken our greatness. Propaganda is ubiquitous, and everyone uses propaganda. In political propaganda, your main message is something other than the information you're conveying. Fascist propaganda is a very particular structure. It's based around a friend-enemy distinction. The political opponent, they are a merciless threat to your very existence and your traditions. They are the other. When they are in charge, it subverts the nation. So the structure of fascist propaganda is based on the idea that the other are fundamentally opposed to the nation. As Hitler says in Mein Kampf, science is only useful insofar as it strengthens the nation. Fascism is a cult of the leader. It involves the leader setting the rules about what's true and false. So any kind of expertise, reality, all of that is a challenge to the authority of the leader. If science would help him, then he can say, okay, I'll use it. Institutions that teach multiple perspectives on history in all its complexity are always a threat to the fascist leader. The center of democracy is truth. You're not free if you've been lied to. Nobody thinks the people of North Korea are free. The people of North Korea will vote for dear leader every time because they've been lied to. It's not a free vote because they don't have access to the truth. Equality similarly requires truth, because equality in democracy doesn't mean we all have the same amount of money. It doesn't mean we all have the same car. It means political equality, that each of our voices matters the same. And political equality means speaking truth to power. If someone really powerful is humiliated when they're caught lying, that's the core of political equality. So if you're going to rip the heart out of democracy, you get people used to lies. Here's a fact about humans. We all pretty much suck to the same degree. One group of us is not better than another group of us. Hierarchy is central here because it's the big lie at the center of things. What is racism but one big lie? Racism is the lie that one group is better than another. You're told this religion is better, this race is better, this gender is better. It's really a moral claim, has more moral worth. And then once you have hierarchy set up, you can make people very nervous and frightened about losing their position on that hierarchy. Hierarchy goes right into victimhood, because once you convince people that they are justifiably higher on the hierarchy, then you can tell them that they're victims of equality. German Christians are victims of Jews. White Americans are victims of Black American equality. Men are victims of feminism. Once you convince people that they should be better, that they have earned a position on the hierarchy over others, then you can tell them that equality is actually victimhood. Loyalty to the dominant group means law-abidingness, and the minority group is by its nature not law-abiding. Law and order in fascist politics means the members of the minority group who accept their subservient role, they're law-abiding, and the members of the dominant group, by their very nature, are law-abiding. By definition, the leader can't violate law and order. So law and order doesn't mean justice. Law and order doesn't mean equality. Law and order structures who's legitimate and who's not. Everywhere around the world, no matter what the situation is, in very different socioeconomic conditions, the fascist leader comes and tells you, your women and children are under threat. You need a strong man to protect your families. They make conservatives hysterically afraid of transgender rights or homosexuality, other ways of living. These are not people trying to live their own lives. They're trying to destroy your life, and they're coming after your children. What the fascist politician does is they take conservatives who aren't fascist at all, and they say, look, I know you might not like my ways. You might think I'm a womanizer. You might think I'm violent in my rhetoric, but you need someone like me now. You need someone like me because homosexuality, it isn't just trying for equality. It's coming after your family. Fascist movements typically, though not invariably, rest on an urban-rural divide. The cities are where there's decadence, where the elites congregate, where there's immigrants, there's criminality, there's Sodom and Gomorrah. In the city, there's not real work. The pure, hardworking, real members of the nation live in the rural areas where they work hard with their hands. When our politicians talk about inner city voters or urban voters, we all know what they mean. Arbeit macht frei, work shall make you free. This was written on the gates of Auschwitz. The idea is that the minority group, they're lazy and they need to be made to work. Free labor. The minority group and the leftists, they're lazy by their nature, and it gives them a work ethic. Labor unions are run by communists who are trying to make things easier. Hard work is a virtue. In liberal democracy, we don't value people by how hard they work. What would happen to disabled people who can't work? They would then have no value. It's why the Nazis had the T4 program to murder the disabled, because the disabled were lebensunwertiges Leben, life unworthy of life, because to be valued was to be capable of hard work. Each of these individual elements is not in and of itself fascist, but you have to worry when they're all grouped together. When honest conservatives are lured into fascism by people who tell them, look, it's an existential fight. I know you don't accept everything we do, you don't accept every doctrine, but your family is under threat. Your family is at risk. So without us, you're in peril. Those moments are the times when we need to worry about fascism.
Beloveds, we know that the time between now and the election, as well as the weeks following November 5th, have significant potential for increased disinformation, chaos, and even violence in our country. While Unitarian Universalist congregations are not likely to be primary targets at this time, we know that many of our communities are in hotspots where both our members and our neighbors are likely to be at increased risk. This is particularly true for migrants, for trans and non-binary people, for queer folks, and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities.
While it sounds simple, the first and most important thing you can do right now is to be in communication with one another. Check in with your people. Make sure they're okay. Keep the lines of communication open. We've learned some hard lessons throughout recent years, so draw on those lessons from the pandemic to make sure you have effective communication structures and a nimble strategy for how to make decisions together. Pay attention to who is coming in and out of the building when your community is gathered, and remember the importance of de-escalation as you take your own measures to support the safety of all of the people in your space in these uncertain times.
Also, make sure you connect with your regional staff, other local congregations, and experienced organizers in your own neighborhood. The people who will be most equipped to lead in the event of post-election chaos and conflict are those who have lived experiences of the state not being the primary source of their community's safety. People used to moving in coalition, responding strategically under pressure, and seriously taking into account the needs and the safety of a wide variety of people. If you haven't already, have conversations now about whose leadership and analysis you're going to look to for guidance.
Side with Love is actively working with our strategic partners, our Unitarian Universalist Data Action Networks, and our UUA colleagues to provide you all with timely tools, trainings, and resources to protect our elections and to protect our communities. Those tools include ways to assess threats, de-escalate conflict, and leverage our spiritual and physical assets in this critical time. I know many of you are already doing your part to meet this moment and build resilient communities. And we welcome you all to visit the UUA's new Community Resilience Hub at uua.org/community-resilience-hub. Check in often for updates, new resources, and events that will be added on an ongoing basis. Together, we can harness our power to meet this moment, because democracy isn't just what we do, it is who we are and who we want to be together.
In the coming time, we are going to face many decisions about how we show up publicly, how we protect those who are most vulnerable, and what the most faithful and strategic expression of our values will be. We'll be doing all of this in a range of uncertain and rapidly evolving contexts. Sometimes this will mean bold, prophetic public action. Other moments will demand low ego, low visibility commitment. We must lean into the relationships of accountability and trust within our congregations, among our communities, and across our association to meet this moment with the wisdom and courage that will be required of us.
We take up a collection every Sunday morning for the simple reason that our purpose in gathering is for more than ourselves. We want to make sure that the ministries that we need, the ones that infuse worth and dignity into our children and youth, our programs of learning and leadership, and our work in the larger world, are in place to meet the needs of others. We hope you will make a contribution toward these worthy causes by mailing your check to Mission Peak UU Congregation at the address on the screen. You can also use the bill pay option on your online banking, or drop your check in the Mission Peak mail slot, or pay online with a debit or credit card. Thank you for supporting and sustaining the efforts of our members, friends, and staff. Your contributions make loving, learning, and leadership more possible.
Friends, what allows us to move and thrive and respond to these challenging times is the connection that we have to being beloved to one another, to being a beloved community. We become beloved when we share intimacies, when we understand that people have our back and that we show up for others. If you have a joy or a sorrow that by sharing with this community might bring a sense of commitment or solidarity, I invite you, if you're online, to put it in on the chat. If you're with us on purpose, if you're with us, you're here on purpose. Yeah. If you're with us in person, we invite you to write something in the book over on joys and concerns. We will read this aloud, and hopefully we will hear our own concerns resonated back in the faces of the people who join us. If you would like to light a candle as a symbolic representation of a concern that you carry in your heart, we invite you to just drop one of the candles in the water there. It will light up all by itself. It's sort of magic that way. And if you have a joy or concern that is more personal than can be spoken out loud, we would love to have a conversation with you, Reverend Barber or myself, that would help bring a sense of comfort or companionship. These are the joys and concerns that are in our heart this week. First and foremost, for so many people, a joy for Crystal being here with us and sharing. It's really remarkable when somebody is able to capture both melancholy and joy in the same instrument and bring it all together, so thank you. I think that is what we have. And thanks to Vaughn and the choir for just helping to shape what's so meaningful about us coming together. With all of that, with open hearts, with open minds, and with open doors, we invite the love of this community and trust in the goodness that we can create together. Please join with me in the spirit of this reflection. I was about 9 years old when I first remember this game coming to our neighborhood. I liked games a lot, but this one was a little confusing for me. Unlike Monopoly or Parcheesi, which my family played regularly, where the goals were very clear, this game appeared to be more confusing. It was sort of a role play game, formulating moral indignation and bravado. As one of the younger boys hanging around my brother's older friends, I mostly listened, trying to get the gist of how to play. One by one, I watched various boys jump in and take their turn. Now, this wasn't the kind of game that you ever expected to find in anyone's game closet, but through my lifetime, I have played this game on many different occasions, as recently as this past year. It gets played with different groups of people in an interesting variety of places. I suspect that this game appeals much more to those of the male persuasion, since it has an obvious violent edge to it, but I have seen all genders take a turn. I'd be surprised if there were anyone here who has not experienced a round of this game at some point in their life. And though it doesn't have an official name, I think you will know which game I'm talking about if I call it, Would You Kill Hitler? The central question being, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler and save humankind from unspeakable evil, would you do it? That first sunny afternoon, witnessing my first round of the game being played was revelatory and disturbing. I had known who Hitler was, the baddest of all bad guys, the epitome of evil, Darth Vader on steroids. Two things stood out for me right away. First, the over-the-top bravado of 11-year-old boys who all made it clear that they would kill Hitler even more dead than the boy before them. But second, they pointed out something that I hadn't considered. The hard part would not be killing one person, even someone larger than life like Hitler. The hard part would be getting past all of the people who surrounded him, who supported him, who protected him, who idolized him. I remember wondering how one person could get past all of those hundreds or millions of supporters and stop evil. And then came the even more disturbing question, how could someone so evil get the support and protection of so many people? It would be many years from that day before I seriously grappled with the idea of fascism, how and why it emerges, how it takes root in otherwise good and decent people. But honestly, what I remember most from that day more than 50 years ago was the existential relief of being able to shrug off the question, knowing that such evil and the fascism that surrounds it could never happen in America, not during my lifetime.
O God, forbid that one should perish, that one, alas, should go astray. Back in the years, with all together, around the place we'd romp and play. So lonely now, I often wonder, oh, will they come back home someday? I'm lonesome for my precious children, they live so far away. Oh, may they hear my calling and come back home someday. I gave my all for my dear children, to guide them still with love I share. I braved life's storms, defy the tempest, to bring them home from anywhere. I lived my life, I love I gave them, to guide them through this world of strife. I hope and pray we live together in that great glad hereafter life. I'm lonesome for my precious children, they live so far away. Oh, may they hear my calling, and come back home someday. I'm lonesome for my precious children, they live so far away. Oh, may they hear my calling, and come back home someday.
Love that. There's been a lot of talk about fascism lately. Have you noticed? Donald Trump and a number of Republican officials have taken many opportunities to refer to Kamala Harris with descriptors such as communist, Marxist, fascist. Less than 2 weeks ago, Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, a four-star Marine General John Kelly, who studied the tactics of political dictators, called Trump fascist to the core. Anderson Cooper of CNN asked Harris in a televised interview if she thought Trump was fascist, and she said yes. Name-calling, especially in the final weeks of a presidential race, is tragically not uncommon. It sounds like the bullying and bravado of preteen boys. But many experts are now rising up and acknowledging the fascist label is not just rhetorical bluster this time. They say the term is useful, serving as a distress signal for the threat to democracy. We dismiss it, they warn, at our own peril. The conversation has been long an issue of concern for Unitarian Universalists who have made the democratic process central to the way that we practice religion. Last year, the Berry Street lecture, which is the longest running lecture series by any religious denomination in this country, was given by Reverend Dr. Cecilia Kingman, who is Deputy Director of the UUA's Department of Ministry and Faith Development. She talked about the growing number of examples and the severity of impact that these conversations about fascism are having on ordinary citizens, especially those with marginalized identities and society as a whole. And she cited the role that Unitarian Universalism has to play in addressing it. So this morning I want to talk a little bit about what she shared, but before we get there, it's important to go back in history to understand exactly what fascism is, where it came from, and the moments in history that people have expressed concerns at seeing fascism's footprint in the garden outside the home of democracy. Although the word fascism didn't exist in our country when our country was being forged, founding fathers had the concept in mind while writing our Constitution. They realized that we had just emerged from the shadow of a monarchy, and that colonial citizens well knew the stifling subjugation that was part of serving the crown. And as they envisioned what democratic governance might look like, they were well aware that several previous attempts to install the high ideals of democracy had collapsed back into oligarchy and empire. They had studied Plato's warnings about demagogues who exploited free speech to install themselves as tyrants. They wrote the Constitution in a way to avoid the evil that they, like the ancient philosophers before them, called tyranny. The word fascism entered the English language from the Italian. Specifically, it came from Benito Mussolini's political group, which were called the Fascisti. The word fascio translates as bundle, as in bundle of sticks, and referred to the collection of agrarian labor unions that were all brought under the singular control of an autocratic government. Merriam-Webster then drew from that their definition of fascism, which says, a regime that exalts a hierarchy of nations and races above the individual. Fascism proposes an autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader enforcing severe economic and social regimentation and forcibly suppresses opposition. But of course, the example most associated with fascism today, at least in this country, involves the rise of the Third Reich, a term itself which refers to the emergence of the exalted society or race under the dictatorship of Adolf Hitler. In the quest to redesign global society under the jurisdiction of a master race, 11 million people were killed because of their religion or race or culture or tradition or their intellectual ideas, or their political philosophies, or their limited abilities, or sexual orientation, or any expression of diversity that was deemed to be a threat or impurity to Aryan supremacy. Countless millions more were imprisoned and subjugated to forced labor under the motto, Arbeit macht frei, work will set you free. It was the ambition and rapid spread of these regimes and their threat to liberty and justice that drew the United States into World War II. Conversations specifically about fascism began to emerge in 1944. The War Department had been publishing pamphlets for deployed soldiers in World War II titled Army Talks. This series was designed to help military personnel become better informed, thereby becoming better soldiers. I got to read this entire pamphlet, and I will say, those of you who are about my age, or roughly around there, who remember going to elementary school and seeing those film strips, and remember that narrator who was on there, it's just like those. On March 24th, 1945, the topic of the week was fascism. And it said, "You are away from home, separated from your families, no longer at a civilian job or at school, and many of you are risking your very lives," the pamphlet explained, "because of this thing called fascism." But what is fascism? Fascism is not the easiest thing to identify or analyze, it said, nor once in power is it easy to destroy. It is important for our future and the future of our world that as many of us as possible understand the causes and practices of fascism in order to combat it. Fascism, it says, permits no civil liberties, no equality before the law. It treats women as mere breeders. Children, kitchen, and the church was the Nazi slogan for women, the pamphlet said. Americans should not be fooled into thinking that fascism could never come to America. After all, it said, Hitler was once a harmless little clown with a funny mustache. Fascism tries to gain power under the guise of super patriotism and super Americanism. It explained, mirroring the well-known quote by American playwright Sinclair Lewis, who said, "When fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross." The pamphlet goes on to explain that fascists will use three specific techniques to gain power. First, they would pit religious, racial, and economic groups against one another to break down the sense of national unity, marginalizing groups as the enemy leads toward well-planned hate campaigns. Second, they would deny any need for international cooperation. International cooperation would suggest weakness and belie American superiority. Ultranationalism suggests that Americans are the only people that really matter, and this cultivates suspicion and hatred among American public of people of other nations. Third, fascists would insist that the world has but two choices, either fascism or communism, and they label as communists everyone who refuses to support them. Now, simultaneous to this platform for American service members was the effort to inform the American public. With the war drawing to a close, FDR tapped his then Vice President, Henry Wallace, to speak to the American public. Wallace published an essay entitled "The Danger of American Fascism" in the New York Times Magazine in April 1944. A fascist, he said, is one whose lust for money or power is combined with such intensity of intolerance toward those of other races, parties, classes, religions, cultures, regions, or nations as to make him ruthless in his use or deceit or violence to attain his ends. American fascists are most readily recognized by their deliberate perversion of truth and fact. Their newspapers and propaganda carefully cultivate disunity. They use every opportunity to question democracy. They claim to be super patriots, but they would readily destroy every liberty guaranteed by the Constitution to push for monopoly and their own vested interests. Their final objective, said Wallace, is to capture political power so that using the power of the state and the power of the market simultaneously, they would keep the common man in eternal subjugation. Wallace urged America to champion not just the Bill of Rights, but also economic democracy, ethnic democracy, educational democracy, and democracy in the treatment of the sexes. I, for one, will not be confident in democracy's survival if millions of unskilled workers are condemned to near poverty all their lives, he said, with no place in our industrial system, or if half our people must live below the line of decent nutrition, or if most of our children continue to be reared in surroundings where poverty is highest and education is lowest. In his article, Wallace offered a powerful plea, one that some, but certainly not all, took to heart. After all, it was only a few years after the article was published that a junior senator from Wisconsin, sorry, those people from Wisconsin, by the name of Joseph McCarthy rose to prominence by hyperbolizing the threat of communism and instituting a Red Scare to intimidate and traumatize Jews, minorities, elites, and intellectuals who opposed a conservative political agenda. We saw a continuation of widespread racial oppression, subjugation, and trauma through lynchings, church bombings, and Jim Crow. And as I talked about a few weeks ago, when Jim Crow was no longer socially or politically acceptable, we saw this systematic racial subjugation transition toward targeting and criminalizing people of color using the war on drugs. All of these things may seem like anomalies in the obvious and glorious trajectory of democracy onward and upward forever, mere blips on the radar of inevitable goodness and decency. But at every instance through history where fascism has taken hold, there are countless people who know it's not necessary for every fascist strategy to exceed, only for each strategy to create enough disruption and doubt and chaos to keep the existing system just a little bit off balance. I want to share a couple quotes that talk a little bit about what I mean. The first one comes from 2004. A senior advisor to President George W. Bush famously told journalist Ron Susskind that people like Susskind lived in the quote-unquote reality-based community. They believed people could find solutions to problems through careful study of discernible reality. But the aide continued, Suskind's worldview was obsolete. That's not the way the world really works anymore, he said. We are an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you are studying that reality judiciously, as you will act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will all sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will just be left to study what we do. End quote. This is a sophisticated and rather chilling explanation. But a cruder and more simpler version comes from Steve Bannon more recently. The Democrats don't matter, Bannon told a reporter in 2018. The real opposition is the media, and the way to deal with them is to just flood the zone with shit. In other words, keep listeners constantly trying to defend what is real from what is not. That destroys their ability to make sense of the world. Many people turn to a strongman who promises to create order. Others will get so exhausted that they'll just give up. As scholar of totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt noted, authoritarians use this technique to destabilize a population. So what can be done, you ask? Well, the first thing is to remember that fascism thrives on indifference and ignorance. Freedom is the result of being able to know history and hold in your bones a deep understanding of tyranny's tactics. Second, know that you are not alone, even though there are intentional efforts to make you feel like you're alone. The truth is, there are countless of millions of people of every age and race and religion and personal expression who love liberty as much as you and who will work hard and risk a lot to guard against the infringement of not only your personal freedoms, but the freedom of every American in this democracy. Third, it's important to realize that a failure or refusal to level the economic playing field or regulate artificial intelligence technology or shift to a more environmentally sustainable practice in this country, those things are intentional. Bear in mind that Benito Mussolini himself said that fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism, because it is a merger of state and corporate power. The objective of such a partnership is to keep corporate profits high, regulation of political power low, and ensuring that the public is constantly off balance and unable to organize. For the next few points, I want to turn to Reverend Dr. Cecilia Kingman's Berry Street address. She points out that everything that we have been seeing happening may feel too chaotic to even imagine how it could be intentionally orchestrated. But in actuality, there is a strategy in place. The cultivation of chaos and uncertainty is intentional in fascist regimes. For people to turn to fascism, perpetual overwhelm and exhaustion is essential. Kingman pointed out that events over the last decade have felt frustratingly inept, but actually fit well as intentional tactics of allowing chaos to fester. One example that she cites is the lack of concerted COVID response. It wasn't ignorance or poor communication from health agencies as much as a deliberate tactic to create chaos and capitalize on mounting fear and frustration. It also helped to undermine concepts such as expertise and scientific reality. Attacks on the Capitol, threats against governors, defunding of schools and hospitals and social agencies, repealing of environmental protections, and even the growing number of potholes in our streets, these are all tactics to convince us that our society is in a state of infrastructural and moral decay. Perhaps most disturbing is the use of gun violence as a tactic. Violence, particularly mass shootings, serves a purpose to terrorize the public, create fear, and turn to an authoritarian leader who provides easy answers and promises of protections, usually by naming scapegoats and pointing to predecessors and adversaries. Kingman points out that fascists prioritize experiments of scapegoating on the most vulnerable targets of society. They believe, and often rightly, that other people will not act to protect those most vulnerable people, especially when some misunderstood cultural difference can be named or some historical norm can be compromised. At any given moment, fascists are gauging the public's response to gestures of oppression that is placed on marginal groups. Today, we see it in attacks on two particular groups. One are trans siblings, and multiple oppressions are often linked together, making those who are trans, people of color, or poor or disabled even more vulnerable topics. But the second is we are watching our politicians test the allowable level of oppression the government can have over women. Whether the government's decisions about a woman's body or her career or her pay or her parenting or her fitness to hold elected office are all brought into question. It's important to remember that oppression serves to establish conformity to a hierarchy. Kingman called for Unitarian Universalists to act. Yes, voting is important, she says, but our immediate moral obligation is to help people out of the path of direct harm. Be vigilant for attacks on all groups lower in the hierarchy of privilege. Call out cruelty. Don't allow deliberate oppression to be dismissed or excused. And she urged us to forge networks of coalitions that together shape a multi-year plan for keeping fascist politics in check. We need, quote, to get information behind our queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, poor, and disabled colleagues. Our collective survival depends on it. The transfer of leadership is not just some kind of fairness project, she says. It is utterly necessary because no one is better equipped to recognize and fight oppression than the very targets of that oppression. But when she says we need to get behind the leadership of targeted folks, she does not mean that we let targeted folks do all the work and take all the risks. Sometimes, she says, getting behind someone means being in front of them, taking a greater share of the risk when we are asked to do so. We would all do well to remember the lessons learned by fellow spiritual leader Martin Niemöller, who cautiously watched all of this happen as the Nazi Party came to power in the 1930s. Vacillating between feelings of indignation at the atrocities and guilt for his passive complicity, he wrote the famous passage I quote here. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak. Beloveds, may we all look to see the love that truly is at the center of our lives and in this universe and in this country in which we live. And may that call us to do everything in our power to lift up and carry that love to the edge of our existence and to wrap all people in a blanket of care to the glory of life.
Please join me in reciting these words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, hand on your heart, reach out to the world. We are in a powerful moment of history where freedom and even love and community are on the line. But I urge us not to see this just as a dire warning, to be urgent and strong and serious. It is an opportunity to love boldly. Take heart from witnessing the work of our musicians, and in particular our guest musician today who is visiting. Notice how Crystal brings together different styles and genres and people. Notice the passion in her playing. Notice the way that it brings happiness and purpose and healing and joy. That is what the world is asking of all of us in our own way to make possible that we can be in solidarity and union together, one for all. Amen and blessed be. Amen. Please sit for our postlude. Or you can dance.
Did you see that bow dancing on those strings?
Thank you for coming. Just a reminder, we will have coffee and stuff inside because it's too windy outside, so enjoy.
Oh, that was quite a service. Let's move to breakout rooms and talk and chat about it.